Gonna find her. Gonna find her. Gonna find her. Gonna find her. Yeah, I've been searching. I'm searching. Oh yeah, searching every which way. Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, searching. I'm searching. Searching every which way. Yeah, yeah. But I'm like that north away from out here. You know I'll bring her in sometime.
In Searchin, this 1957 Lieber and Stuller hit performed by the Coasters, Billy Guy sings about his determined search that has yielded no results to this point. While he's searching for his love, searching for specific, reliable, and up-to-date information to support customers can often feel just as challenging. The promise of the internet was the world's knowledge at your fingertips. According to the latest estimates, 328.77 million terabytes of data are created each day, and the amount of data is growing exponentially. Speaking of exponentially, in 2022, two new prefixes, ronna and quetta, representing 10 to the 27th power and 10 to the 30th power, were added to the metric system because of the vast amount of data that exists was approaching the top range of the existing prefixes. All this data has contributed to the challenge of locating exactly what you're looking for. Sariel Moshe saw this issue sifting through data during his days in military intelligence. Eventually, he saw the same issue during his time at PayPal, and he set out to improve search by making use of context. This week on Next in Queue, we discuss why keywords will become a thing of the past, why enterprise knowledge-based search bars work so poorly compared to Google, how promptability will change how knowledge is stored, why he expects support teams to change focus from case solving to knowledge creation, and why trust will become the key to the next level of search. Hey, do you have tickets for this month's Call and Contact Center Expo in Las Vegas? I'm looking forward to meeting you there. And if you don't already have tickets, I'm here to save you $99 by hooking you up with free tickets. That's right, I said free, 90, free. Use the link in the liner notes and my code ROB100 to grab your free tickets to the expo. I will see you there. Now, let's get to it.
Welcome to Next in Queue, the podcast for contact center and customer experience professionals. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy 2 Vision. Eliminate blind spots and see right through every conversation with Happy 2 Vision. Learn more at happitu.com. Now, here's your host, Rob Dwyer.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining another episode of Next in Queue. Sariel, thanks for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing great, Rob. Thank you so much for having me here.
I am excited. I'm really excited to talk about search and kind of what search is going to look like in the future, and in particular, what it's going to look like for support organizations. But before we get started, you've got a pretty interesting background. And so I'd like to talk about when you first kind of got into data.
Let's do that.
So you tell me all about it.
So my background, my original background professionally is actually in military intelligence. So I'm from Israel, and we all do army service here. I lucked out to be in military intelligence, and pretty much in intelligence, you're surrounded by huge amounts of data. And what you're constantly doing is sifting or searching or trying to find information in all that data. So that was really my first, I would say, entry into the world of data, of search, of organizational knowledge. And then after my army service, and after a short stint in a startup that got bought by PayPal, I was working in PayPal for a few years. And that's where I came across a very similar issue to what I had in the military in PayPal, which was, again, huge organization, large amounts of knowledge, spread all over the place. But at the end of the day, when you're trying to get a project running and you're trying to find that Confluence article that someone wrote a year ago, right? It's somewhere there, but to find it, you need to email a guy who emails a guy who finds it and sends it over. And that takes 2 weeks. And I said, this does not make any sense, right? It doesn't make any sense that in a large enterprise, people whose salaries are in the hundreds of thousands are spending 2 weeks trying to find a Confluence article.
Yeah.
And that's where really my the thoughts started running. How do we do this? How can we make this better? How can we improve on the situation? And that's where the idea of an implicit search really started coming to mind. The idea being that when you're working in the enterprise, you're constantly surrounded by context, right? You're not just thinking up stuff and writing it down. You have an email, you have a case, you have a Jira bug, you have everything you're working on, Slack, message or thread, whatever it is, it's context. And that context already has huge amounts of data that can be used to search automatically based on what you're working on, right? And it seemed no one out there was really making use of that context. So you go into an email, I would expect, as a worker in PayPal, that something out there would read through the email and say, oh, you need this Confluence article that you don't know anything about. Here, let's bring it for you, right?
Yeah.
I'm reading through a thread in Slack, and something will tell me, oh, someone just answered that exact same question in this other channel 2 weeks ago. Take a look. Those are the kinds of ideas. Those are the kinds of use cases that started coming up, and that's how we got into XFind. That's I met two amazing partners. This is about already 4 years ago, and we started building this, and it's amazing that we actually got it running. It's working. We have thousands of users already using the system with the basic idea of implicit search, of something that runs based on the context of what they're working on and automatically retrieves them relevant knowledge, saves them loads of time, loads of money, and really makes their life much nicer. So that's the background of how I got into search.
Yeah, I think it's striking, and people who aren't involved in the tech space may not really recognize how much data companies have today and how challenging it can be to find it. I mean, we are literally defining new prefixes in the metric system because we have so much data that we need bigger numbers to define how much storage space we need for this data. Like that's the scale we're talking about, is we're literally having to come up with new numbers. And so when you think about the internet age and all of the digital data that we have today, it's beginning to really dwarf what used to be in all the libraries across the entire world. And that was, the promise of digital and connectivity is being able to have information at your fingertips, right? That's what we were always told, information at your fingertips.
Exactly. And I think you touched upon the point of where search has been up till now and why I really think it's going to change, and that is libraries. So uh, there's going into the digital world, I think the mindset, and Google actually has a lot to be blamed for in a sense. Even though they did an amazing job in really, as you said, bringing everything to your fingertips. Um, but in a sense, the transformation from the physical to the digital world still focused us on the idea of keywords or on the idea of metadata as the main way to reach information, right? What Google has educated all the masses in the past 20 years is keyword your way to the relevant information you want, right? Just put in 2 words and we'll find it for you.
Right.
And I mean, for Google, it's worked amazingly, and we're all using it, in our daily. It's ingrained in what we do, right, all the time. But um, in the enterprise setting, it just does not work. Um, and what we've seen is that in the past 20 years, with Google, there have been so many vendors trying to create that Google for the enterprise thing, right? Trying to imitate that idea of keyword searching, search bars in the enterprise will find you everything. And basically, our understanding, and this is one of the lightning moments, the light bulb moments, maybe at the beginning of XFind, was why is this not working? Why are those enterprise search bars not working? And basically, the reason is technological. It's well, I would say more than that. It's a combination of the way the technology works and the way knowledge workers are trained to work. So the technology of Google is pretty much based on millions of similar searches, right? So when you have, millions, billions, trillions of similar searches in all over the internet, you can really train models to figure out, based on very specific words, what you're actually aiming for, right? If I look for, I don't know, pizza Jerusalem, right? It will probably figure out, based on my IP and on what millions of other people searched around me, that these are the top pizzas you should be looking at.
Yeah. And if you spell pizza wrong, it
It'll still figure it
recognizes,
out.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, did you mean this? Because
Right.
that many people have misspelled it the same way, right?
Exactly. But in the enterprise, you don't have nearly, like, it doesn't even start to be close to the amount of training data you need to make these models that accurate. And then what you end up with is two, I would say, non-amazing options. So the first is these subpar keyword search bars that, I've heard this so many times from so many users of ours, that they try to search, in all these different search, federated search, specific search, and it just doesn't find. They know, like, they know there's an item there, but they just can't find it because they can't think of the specific words they need to use. So that's one option. And the second option is metadata tagging yourself to death. Trying to get at every keyword on that item to make sure you'll reach it a year later. And that is both very time consuming and very ineffective, basically because metadata is constantly changing, right? The basic issues you're dealing with are constantly changing. You're never going to think, a few months in advance what keywords you're going to have in place on these items. And that's why, at the end of the day, I think regardless of GPT and LLMs and all that, which we'll speak about, regardless of that, the idea of keyword searching is fading away,
Mm,
has been fading away for years in favor of something that can be a bit smarter than that,
yeah.
something more based on context, something that really understands, right? That I think that's the biggest word that I've heard users use over and over again is understand what I'm looking for, right? Figure out, just understand what I need. You know, that Google feel, but in the enterprise, it's not the search bar, it's that Google understands what you're looking for. Can I have something like that? Um, and I think that's really where we're going, and that's why it's so amazing that really all these LLMs suddenly exploded into our lives because that's sort of what they're doing, right? They
Yeah.
understand what we're saying.
Yeah, that natural language processing, that ability to put context around the key words, right? Because that's the difference between a chat GPT and some of the things that preceded it is it's able to understand the context that you're prompting it with. So not only does it understand that context, but it can respond with context.
Exactly.
Whereas, previous systems, even, Google's search, you could ask a series of questions and it kind of understood the context based off of the previous question. But these large language models now can provide loads of context in speech patterns that are very similar to what we're used to.
Mhm. And I think that this ability, this sudden like discovery of the ability to figure out this context uh is really has already and is going to have a huge impact on the basic ideas of how we build and organize data, or how we create data, especially in the enterprise, and especially for customer-facing teams that
Yeah.
are the most knowledge-driven of them all in the enterprise. I think it's going to really change the most basic concepts of what is a knowledge article, what is knowledge, like what does a knowledge item look like? I think the basic relationship between how you create knowledge and how you use it. And this is where I'm seeing this going, um, from conversations with support leaders and in general. So that basic relationship between the knowledge and how you use it is changing from the idea of findability, right? You want to create a knowledge article that someone will be able to find, to, I would call it promptability. Uh,
Mm,
that's a new term I just coined today,
yeah.
but I really think that that's where it's going. And what does promptability means? How do you store knowledge in a way that it will be easiest to use in order to generate specific answers, right, for specific needs in the context of whatever that user in the future is going to be in? And it's like a shift in the way we think of what knowledge is, right? It's not knowledge items anymore. It's we're building the context in a way that can be used, right, for any which reason that can be relevant to this knowledge in the future.
Yeah.
If that makes sense what I'm saying, even I think it's still a bit like, out there.
Yeah. I'm curious, one of the biggest problems that we've seen with Chat GPT is not creativity. In fact, or maybe that is the problem because some of its answers are not always accurate, but it sounds very confident. And I think that is one thing that we have always had to navigate with the search engine, right? Whether it's Google or some other search engine, is we kind of have to dig and find something that we feel confident in. These large language models often sound very confident in the information they're presenting you, but it may not always be accurate. How do we combat that in the enterprise system? Because policies change, procedures change, like just like everything in the world changes, that happens in the enterprise. So how do we combat that?
I think that's the most important question on the technical level. That's going to have to be figured out. To make the most of these new technologies. So actually, I don't know if you're familiar with Brave, for example, or I think even the new Bing chat. I was playing around with them a bit. They make sure to bring you a source for everything, right, that they write. Unlike ChatGPT, where it's just like, giving you whatever answer it wants, which is amazing. But as you said, it's super confident and you don't really know it means anything. Here, they'll make sure to give you an actual source for what they wrote out.
Citations, essentially, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, a citation. I think that is basically where it's gonna be. I think, and by the way, this is in our roadmap in XFind, is how to combine our models that we already have that are very precise in their ability to retrieve specific items for a context. How do we combine that with the LLMs in order to not only just bring you an item, but to extract a specific answer from that item? So the way this raises the confidence level is that there are abilities using classical NLP to assess how relevant a certain item is to a certain context, or context to context. That we already have in place. And once we have that in place, then just taking the specific answer out of those retrieved items is much more precise than just trying to train it on take all these articles we have in our corpus and good luck, and try to figure out based on that. And I think really that is where, especially in really like the areas in the enterprise where you really need the precision. You can't just make up stuff. You're really going to need to be precise, exact. Imagine, I don't know, medical issues. All these areas where it's really it's crucial that the precision is there. You're going to have to be able to make sure you can connect it to a certain citation, to a certain source. And that goes back to what I said earlier, which is that's why I think the basic idea of knowledge articles is going to change. We're not going to build knowledge articles anymore, or knowledge items. I don't even know if the term articles is going to be relevant, right? We're not going to build knowledge items for them to be able to be retrieved and served as an item. We're going to build them in a way that can be used to develop answers based on a specific context. So you're gonna have to have like a source that's constantly updated and constantly checked to be correct. And based on that, once you know that knowledge is correct, then you have some this LLM serve up the very specific information taken out of there. I think that's the dynamic that we're gonna start seeing over the coming months, over the coming years.
Yeah. I am curious if you have any concerns about the compute power that is required to run some of these LLMs. I've heard that, an LLM search like a Chat GPT is 10 times as intensive as a Google search. And given that Google searches just continually get more and more and more, right? Number one, because of reach, and number two, because the population of the world keeps growing and the people who are connected keeps growing. is that sustainable? And how do we make sure, or maybe the question is, how do we make sure it's sustainable?
Right. So when I was in PayPal, this is about 8 years ago, very basic, um, like what's considered today very basic algorithms in NLP and machine learning in general required a lot of computation power. And slowly, and we've seen this, over the past 20, 30, 40 years, it's a pretty constant that you know companies, organizations learn to make these systems much more efficient over time. At the end of the day, it costs money to run these LLMs, right? Companies are going to come up with ideas of how to reduce that cost.
Yeah.
So I'm not very concerned about that. It is true that for this start, the head start of this new world of LLMs, yes, it's gonna take a while till these things are efficient enough to be really viable in the big way. But I'm pretty sure, and we've seen this in other areas as well. I mean, you know, uh, the whole area of visuals of what's the missing the term, um, like stuff like Midjourney, coming up
Mhm.
with pictures and stuff like that. I mean, again, look 10 years back, you needed like, lots of computational power to run these. Today, it's happening in seconds. So these things are obviously going to evolve. I'm not very concerned about that. Um, what I am concerned about is more on the um, like the precision. Like how does this not become a hype that will then, people will, how does this not become the second chatbot? In a sense that, people will sure are, I'm hearing this all the time. Oh, this is gonna, this is gonna solve. We're not gonna need any support teams anymore. You can just feed it to Chat GPT and it'll answer all your questions. That's the expectation. Reality is quite different.
Yeah.
It's not that easy to fine tune an LLM, to bring up a very specific, I don't know, medical question or even like a cybersecurity question. These are complex systems. You really need to be able to fine tune these systems very precisely in order to be able to, figure out all the minutiae of some of these more complex systems. That's going to take some work. It's not going to happen overnight. I think though the idea of what is possible, I think that's the big thing here is that suddenly people figure out, oh, this is really possible, right? We can answer questions based on large amounts of knowledge without having to, build an article before that, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so that is possible. We don't, it suddenly reduces significantly the amount of energy you need to input into sitting down and writing stuff, and it can really focus the what people are doing in developing the knowledge. And I think today those two things have been married together for a very long time. I mean, maybe even going back to um, the beginning of printing, right? Developing knowledge and writing it down, those two things go together. And I think like this is the first time people are starting to think, wait, maybe they're not. Maybe there's developing knowledge is one aspect, and then you can have a machine write it down in the best way possible, right? To serve whatever need that knowledge can serve to the specific user. I think that's like it's a very basic concept that's changing. To bring it to a very specific example where I see this happening is in the support use case. I think that support teams over the coming years are going to change today. Like the concept of a support team, of a customer experience, customer support, is very focused on the case solving, right? So you try to self-serve as much as possible, or deflect, right, as many cases as you can. But at the end of the day, some cases are going to come in and you're going to have to answer them, right?
Yeah.
That's like how we think, how we imagine a support team. And given these LLMs, given this new capability that's suddenly coming out, I think that's, over the coming years, going to totally change. I think reactive case solving is going to become like a very small element. And what support teams are actually going to be doing is developing knowledge in a way that can proactively serve customers when they have issues. So imagine the following scenario. You're sitting, and this is not like imagination. This is going to happen in 2 years. I'm pretty sure about it. You're working on some system, and suddenly you see an error, and so in your system there's an error. The error message has some text in it. The page you're on has some text in it, right? And that is automatically sent to some sort of LLM, that goes and fetches the specific answer from all the knowledge that the vendor has in place to answer that specific need, without any humans involved in that interaction. What humans did need to do, though, is make sure that that knowledge is updated and in place for the LLM to go fetch it, right? So I think really support teams are going to change drastically in that aspect, focusing much more on knowledge creation than on reactive case solving. I'm pretty sure it's going to happen in other enterprise teams as well. Like maybe even the basic idea of selling is going to change, right? Not sure that you really need so many. I mean, the basic interactions will be needed, but a lot of the answers, a lot of the question answers may be automated in the sales process for your specific needs, right? That's again going back to what you noted about the context to context, that specificity, if that's the correct way of saying that, of being able to conjure up relevant knowledge to your very specific need. I think that's like that's where we're going.
Mm.
And it's pretty amazing when you think about it. I think like enterprise teams are going to look very different from what they look today, given these capabilities.
Today's word, kids, specificity. Have fun with that. Go see if you can spell it and practice it. It's a fun one. You said something about the sales process, and I get it if we're talking about a commodity, because I think people are willing to buy a commodity without a person, as long as they trust the information and they feel like they're getting the best price. That's how commodities are sold, right? Basically at the price level. But there are complex things that I'm just not convinced yet that people are going to buy without a person being involved, because part of the buying process is trust.
Mhm.
Yes, I may give a certain amount of trust to a machine. This was actually a conversation that we had on a previous episode when we were talking about decision making, right? But I don't know, right? Where do we stop giving our trust as humans to the data, and when do we need a person to reassure us? Because sales is an emotional process.
Totally.
So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Right. So trust is another very big issue that I totally did not touch upon. But we're seeing it already in the existing format of XFind. No text generation, just retrieval. Already there, we're seeing trust issues. Like, users are
Mm.
saying, how do I know that what you brought me is the most relevant item? And it really comes down to, I think, uh, user experience can create trust.
Mm.
User experience in the very wide sense of the term. So what do I mean by that? I just saw a video, I think it was yesterday. Disney came out with this robot. I don't know if you saw that.
I haven't seen this. Now I got to
Yeah,
check it out.
yeah, I'll send it over later. It was pretty amazing. Disney created this robot of like, it's supposedly a little girl learning how to skate. And you see in this video how like 1 minute into the exchange, because the robot actually acts like a human, um, the crowd suddenly interacts with it as if it's a human, right?
Hmm.
Suddenly they trust it. And I've seen this, and I've read about it, that in Japan already many hospitals or care homes have robots taking care of people. And how do you make people, feel okay with these robots? They can do an amazing job, but you might not feel okay if it's a robot. You have to sort of build it in a way to interact like a human would, right? And once it does, I think, for 80% of purposes, uh, it should be good. But again, it comes down to making it as human as possible. Humans created these robots, right? They can, develop them, in the human way, in like, to feel and to act based on human values in a sense. Um, it's a hard concept to wrap I think our heads around. I'm not totally convinced, I'm not totally sold on my own idea here because, it's still, you're saying, but it's a robot, it's not a human, right? But I think it is possible. I think, and here it's really the very, being very specific in the experience is crucial. Because the more in a sense, the more you feel that a human being created this, right, the more you trust it, right? And once you have that feeling, it can be totally automated, right? But you feel that someone stood behind this, and put his mind into how to make this as human as possible.
Interesting. Interesting. So I'm curious if you think finding relevant information or getting people to trust the information you found is more difficult.
Um, Getting people to trust for sure. Right? It's not even a
Always the
question.
people in the equation, isn't it? We're wild cards.
Because I've seen time and time again. I've spoken to users. I've said, okay, let's open a support case, and let's see how, they're saying no, it's not finding me relevant information. And I said, okay, let's open a support case. Let's look at what it is finding you, and then um, we start going over the list and say, oh yeah, this is relevant. Oh yeah, this is good as well. Wow, that's amazing. Oh yeah, I'll use this one. But so then you try to figure out, so what was the issue here? The issue is trust. The
Mhm.
issue is I don't believe that a system, right, is able to do this. So I'm not going to even try to look, right?
Yeah.
And I understand that. And again, this really comes down to how do you build an interaction that is as human as possible while doing, while automating the entire thing. It's a hard equation.
Yeah.
It's not an easy one. But that's where I think a lot of the focus is going to have to go. And by the way, I think that's, if there's one thing that ChatGPT and OpenAI got good in in what they came out with in ChatGPT is exactly that. It feels like you are conversing with a human being, right? I think that was like
Mhm.
the one big thing that everyone was talking about was, wow, it really, it's a question answer. It's not just, I ask it a question and it comes up with an answer. I can then continue the conversation, right,
Right.
with a human being. So
Yeah.
once you can do that, you start trusting it, right? But then, of course, it comes back to the confidence, right? It's too confident, it's too cocky. It gives you wrong answers.
And in
And
Bing's case, it starts insulting you. And who knows what.
exactly. That's actually the other side of human interaction, right? That's where the value side comes in, right?
Yeah.
You want to embed it with the right values. Um, but I really think that's a very important point. Again, this comes back to what our customer support teams are going to be doing. They are going to work on how to create knowledge that can be automated in the right way, giving the right experience, right?
Yeah.
And the precise and accurate experience to the users.
Yeah. I
That,
think at the end of the day, our support, like all the other aspects of customer experience, what we're trying to do, sometimes we do it well and sometimes we don't, is we're always trying to replicate that experience when it was, the family owned store on Main Street who
right.
knows everybody in town. And when you walk in, if you ask them if they have something, they either say yes or no. And if they say yes, they can tell you exactly where it is in the store and
Mhm.
how much it costs. Or if not, they tell you it's going to take this long for me to get it. And at the same time, they ask how your kids are and, how your weekend was, right? That experience, which we, I think thrived with, we're always seeking to replicate, like, how can we do that, but do it at scale, right? How do we do it when we don't know this one person intimately, like they're my neighbor,
Mhm.
but how can we still give them that feeling? And that holds true of support. Like, how can I provide support teams with information that they
Absolutely.
feel like, yeah, I got this from the person who knows, and I trust that it's absolutely correct.
Absolutely, and again, this comes back to it's a combination of trust and accuracy, right?
Mhm.
You want a system that can bring you the exact right information, right? But be nice about it, you know. Right? I have to say, when we were talking now, I thought the best interactions I always have with support are when they end the conversation with "Have a good day."
Yeah.
Like, once you do that, you got me, because I understand I'm not just another item on the list. I'm actually a human being. You understand I need help, and you're being nice about it, but you're really helping me, right? If you're being nice about it, but I'm not getting any help, so it has to be the combination of both. So and that goes, it's precision and trust, right?
Yeah.
It's true for knowledge retrieval. It's true for knowledge generation. It's true all across the board. Um, but like the step between having to search for information, going back to the beginning of our conversation, having that information retrieved to you precisely, and then having it generated straight to the customer. I think the two elements there are a speed, of course, but I don't think that's the main element. I think it's the precision.
Yeah.
You being able to actually find the right information, the exact right information. I think a lot of times the human element is prone to error, especially in the complex, right? Humans don't always know what's out there. An index for an LLM does know what's out there. It can just fetch it, right away. So I think that's the winning combination that we're really going to have to aim towards. Um, and embedding it with the values, right? Embedding with values that will create the trust.
Yeah. Good stuff. If someone wants to talk to you more in depth about finding information in their organization or learn more about XFind, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So LinkedIn, I'm Sariel Moshe. Reach out. I'd love to talk. You can reach out on our site, xfind.ai, as well. Those are, I guess, the two best ways to reach out. Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
love to
awesome.
talk.
I'll make sure that's in the liner notes. Sariel, number one, thanks for joining the show. And number two, have a good day.
Thank you, Rob. You too. Have a great day.
Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy To and is produced by me, Rob Dwyer. If you enjoy this podcast, please by all means subscribe and or rate this podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. But more importantly, please tell just one person about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for people to discover new content. As always, thanks for listening.